Where are we at on your, what episode are you on today?
I'm cranking in episode 5.
Episode 5. Trying to land this plane.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts on how we do that?
Well, yes, but it's just like everything. You go back and forth. It's like I have one idea and I chase it for a while, and then, I'm like, oh, but what about this? It's like it's hard to say everything you want to say in like the last couple of minutes.
Yeah.
To like bring it all home. So really got to be choosy on what actually goes in there.
So long N64.
Yeah, I think the voiceover coming out of that instead of going straight into the interviews, it's just good to hear Sean kind of introduce that.
I came in during the post-production process. At first I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never gonna get this. They're gonna hate me, they're not gonna
Jeremy bought an arcade cabinet, put it in the office, and whew, let me tell you, there were some Donkey Kong battles.
We've got a fantastic team who are very talented at what they do. Coming here, it was cool to see our lead editors. They would kind of lay down the bones of sections.
And like seeing that Jeremy seemed to trust me so much with his project that he had been working on for so long.
And it just has really been such a cool process with a whole group of talented people.
I'm just really proud of the team. It's just, mind-blowing just seeing how far it's come.
My official title is Creative Director. Day to day, my duties at Mediajuice is overseeing the team and client work and all the stuff we do. A lot of people look at the type of work that we do at my production company. You see a lot of games, video games.
Trailers and promos and commercials and things like that for all of our clients.
In the early 2000s, I worked at a company called Funimation. And we did licensing for lots of Japanese anime. And I saw all the marketing materials, like the websites that they would hire designers and artists to build, and the trailers and the TV spots. And man, I really have this creative itch. I launched Mediajuice in 2004. And Atari was our first client. And they hired us to start cutting the trailers for Dragon Ball Z for the upcoming slate of games. And then that led to other promotional materials, working with movie studios, television studios. I think after 2 or 3 years, I kind of got bit with the filmmaking bug, read some books on screenwriting and shot some short films. And so through that process, I realized that I was going to kind of be a one-man show for a while because I just didn't have the resources to go do a big production. And so I thought, okay, what can I do? We work in the video game industry. We work with a lot of publishers and developers. And I just thought, a documentary about video games. I started calling some of my friends in the video game industry and said, hey, will you do an interview? So that's where we started. So when we came to the end of shooting Video Games the Movie, we've got all this mountain of footage and realized like, oh, we're only halfway there. We've got to cut this thing together. We've got to go into the post-production process. And that's going to take time, which is going to take money, and just decided that crowdfunding would be a way to go. And my editor, Kenny, and I just looked at like, okay, what would be some fun things we could do? Like, okay, we'll make a poster, we'll make t-shirts, all the stuff you do for Kickstarter. Launched it, and within 48 hours had reached almost 60 or 70% of our goal. We were wrapping up our Kickstarter campaign. I think we had a week or so to go. And I was like, oh my gosh, we had a $10,000 donation from Zach Braff.
Yeah, it's Model X R253 and it was a gold cartridge.
The Kickstarter really was the stake in the ground, and the celebrity involvement only helped us get more ink. During this process, Sean Astin sent me an email and said, hey, congrats on the Kickstarter. I love what you're doing. I'd love to be involved. And we shot an interview with Sean first.
The general public, I think they'll watch this movie and I think they'll think, oh yeah, I remember that one. And they'll say that a lot.
But then after the interview, we had this like 3-hour long dinner talking about my process in making the documentary and me as a filmmaker and him as a filmmaker, and that kind of evolved into him becoming the narrator of the movie.
I'm ready if you're ready. Are you ready?
We are rolling. This is
right.
VO Pioneering 8-Bit Games, and this is take 25.
Pioneering 8-Bit Games.
Not in title, but in execution. He was sort of a producer, executive producer of the film, because he had a lot of input, had a lot of ideas.
Also, we just got to work that little thing there. Should switch those two as well. Okay. That's a new thought. This is what you want, right?
Yeah, that's good.
It's a film that's garnering a lot of attention, not just in the film world, but in the realm in which this film is based. Video Games the Movie.
Video Games the Movie.
Video Games the Movie. Video Games the Movie.
Video Games the Movie.
For the most part, I think the film has held up and is held up by the fans. We see those comments, and it's really encouraging.
Boom! Hey everybody, Sean Astin here with Jeremy Sneed, the director, producer, creator of Video Games the Movie. We are here working on Unlocked.
Unlocked, the world of games revealed, and it's a fascinating documentary behind the scenes of making video games.
Sean Astin and Matt Walsh and so many other people who are really like smart people asking interesting questions about a fascinating topic. I think Kevin Bean listeners are really going to enjoy this.
I do too.
Unlocked was fun. It's a very polished, well-produced series. I think if I had it to do again, I would probably look at partnering with a network or a studio and saying, hey, what do you think and what do you want to see? And if we got that feedback from them to say, well, we really like what you did here, but our audience is interested in X, Y, Z.
When Jeremy first told me that he was looking at embarking down this Nintendo path, I was honestly really shocked. Coming off of the back of, we did VGTM and then we did Unlocked, and man, it can really take it out of you. And he was just ready to take on the next challenge.
Going into it, I was nervous. Me and my whole team were like, do we want to go here? This is sort of the darling of the video game industry. You're Pokemon era, I'm in Super Mario era, you're in 64 era.
Yep.
It's like heartening to see those characters and hear those games, and it reminds people why they're watching this documentary.
So even with that idea, we're having meetings and whiteboarding things and just kind of dreaming. It's like those instruments are it's not gaming music.
It's like we've got plenty of people saying like, yeah, Nintendo was kind of tough to work with.
We don't use a lot of songs with lyrics, but this is a little good time to have some meaning behind it.
Basically, that's going to cover console wars. I hope that the experience that we've had the past decade or so in filmmaking has helped to really craft a series that people will love. This whiteboard is kind of where it all started. that just kind of goes on through the whole thing, and I've used this a lot before we ever even started shooting or editing. Kind of based on our conversation about where are we in time here? Is it 1995 and 2002? I basically identified, who are the key characters, key moments in the story.
This is my squad.
Specifically, I created a column called "Where's the Drama?" In any documentary, it's like, of course, there's the information that you're getting, but what's entertaining is dramatic, and what's dramatic is entertaining. Okay, so this is the list. So we've got Perrin. She's going to have some really good stuff, kind of post Super Nintendo. I knew what I wanted to shoot, what I wanted to ask the interviewees, and then ultimately what we wanted to bring back for post-production. That's what we got going on here. We know what the story is, at least for the narration. We just got through making a cue sheet.
A capitalist dreamscape.
That was great.
Yeah.
We all have our own personal history and journey and love that we have for Nintendo and all the characters. So we wanted to be very careful with the story. I don't think people have seen something like this.
Yeah.
And people haven't really handled the subject matter of video games in a mature way.
Yeah, in a mature way. That's a good way to put it.
And treating it as it's serious and that this actually affects people's lives.
Sometimes it's hard to trying to tell a story. For me, honestly, that's one of the most important, parts of my childhood and of my adult life is working in and around the video game industry. So when we kind of set out to tell the story of the godfather company of the video game industry, which knew that we just wanted to strike the right tone.
Anybody who's done documentary filmmaking knows what a grueling process it is. We can definitely try and get more, but we've got a good batch from them, and I know that a lot of that's already been worked in, but there's always more gems to mine.
All of the dramatic moments of Nintendo's history, as I researched and kind of read all the books about their history, I thought there's a lot of stuff that happens that people aren't aware of. All I've ever known about Nintendo, looking up video game history, is Mario, Miyamoto, Donkey Kong, but it's only part of the story. Can I make a little room here, or are you already done with these parts?
Yeah, let me take a picture.
Is any of this stuff on your archival list from assets we've gotten from people or CNNs of the world?
When Nintendo went through several different iterations of what it was going to be from the outset.
And so I started it as a movie.
So even with that idea, we're having meetings and whiteboarding things and
sort of switched to documentary. Like, okay, can't do the narrative version unless we have big bucks. So how do we do this as a documentary?
Just kind of dreaming. What can we do? What's possible? What can we make happen?
I knew that if we went from a feature to a series, that meant way more time, way more money, way more resources. But I think we all kind of came to the decision, if we're going to tell this story well, we have to give it the time that it needs. A 90-minute feature became a 5-part series. So with a documentary series, dramatically, it's not real different than a narrative series in that you have to follow the same rules of storytelling. So in writing the script and planning out the sort of the chapter markers of where we're going in the story, that's what really informed it, was the characters. Finished. My goal as a filmmaker has been to take, you know, just my experience and passion for video game history, the video game industry, and sort of bring that down into a narrative form to say, okay, there's all these interesting stories, there's all these interesting companies, all these interesting games. To take all of that and put it into a narrative that's interesting.
Yo, what's up, man?
Oh, just getting back from this shoot, parent.
Where was that at?
The process for booking interviews and finding talent and reaching out is varied. There's a lot of Nintendo veterans, people that worked for the company that are now either living in Seattle or somewhere else. And it's really just doing the research. It's kind of beg, borrow, and steal. I know a lot of people in the video game industry, so there's always sort of a connection point of like, hey, I saw that you used to work with, you know, Perrin Kaplan. Do you have a connection to her? Can you connect me to her?
You know, was she able to kind of provide any new insight?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's honestly not even filling in holes in the story. It's more of like, having this person that lived the history of it, that was boots on the ground there when the DS released, when the N64 released, and was the main spokesperson. It was like, it was just kind of surreal. I'm like...
While we were all working in the office on client projects and trailers and all kinds of other stuff, Jeremy would be out kind of talking to us remotely, because he'd be flying across the country to lots of different states, to California, to Vegas, to Washington, North Carolina, to talk to all of the great talented people we have in our show.
That's great. That's all I need. Thank you. Oh my God. Thank you so much.
Like I said, you know, it's we've all. I think you've cut some apparent into your stuff too.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you've got the narration and music and even like industry veterans talking, it's like, yeah, that's cool. But it's like, when you cut in like people like Perrin or Ron, like people from Nintendo, just the whole thing kind of takes on a different feeling. I feel like, I don't know.
Oh yeah, well, it's like the importance.
All of the folks that used to work at Nintendo all kind of still live in the Washington, Seattle, Redmond area. And a lot of times, you see this in a lot of documentaries, you interview one person and they say, hey, you know who you should talk to is so-and-so, and yeah, I've got their phone number, I've got their email.
Gail Tilden?
Gail, yeah, I talked to Gail's daughter, I think it was, because I got her number and called, and a young lady answered, and I said, is this Gail Tilden? And she said, no, that's my mom.
Yeah, it's, I want to say...
But it's still really interesting. Like, Perrin talks about her, oh yeah, she took one of her little Hanafuda cards and made it into a little lapel pin that she can wear.
Yeah. I have one that's really pretty. It's got sparkles and it's a flower, and I turned it into a pin. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Nice. Stuff like that.
Well, it's like when Howard Phillips was like, you know, we had that little Game Boy sitting there, and he just naturally kind of picked it up.
We'll talk about it. So yeah, let's start with.
You know what? I have my original Game Boy.
Do you?
Those moments you don't really plan for, but you happen to be rolling, and it's just like, oh man, that's such a good moment.
Yeah, such like things that you'll miss if you're not paying attention. Yeah.
One day, one cold winter's day, he said, "Oh, take the soup away. Oh, take the nasty soup away. I won't have any soup today."
Setting up interviews is always, you know, it's a different location, it's different lighting, it's sometimes a different crew. A lot of times I'll take my crew from Mediajuice with me, but there are times where we've got a full production slate, and I've got crews in LA and Seattle and New York and people that I've worked with. So matching the style of framing and lighting across different crews and different locations. Sometimes it's in a hotel room, sometimes it's at somebody's house. You kind of create a style guide that I can give to other camera ops, and depending on the scenario, just try to match it so it looks somewhat all in the same world.
What your thoughts were of this new company, Nintendo, bringing life to a dead industry in America?
Right. Well, back in the 80s again, I was at Mattel.
Crazy as it sounds, they've all, it's like my parent told me, it's like, she said she's gotten so many requests to do this, but we are the second people that she said yes to is for a documentary.
Interesting. Well, the only reason I did it is I do know that people are super interested in it.
Oh yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, Nintendo's not easy, so I feel like it's like this hasn't been done before.
Right.
So as crazy as it sounds to say that the words like, there's no definitive documentary about Nintendo, it's like, well, there's not been. When you first read the Console Wars and saw that it was sort of written from your point of view, was that sort of a coup for you? Like, people are going to finally see my story?
Well, I honestly, I was surprised that I didn't know that I was going to be the main character in the book. I mean, nobody told me that.
We're preparing our loadout for a trip to Boston. Everybody say hi.
Hey-o. What's going on?
It's got the 80s front mullet going on today. Loading out a case here. Kind of traveling light today. Traveling to do documentary is, you just kind of got to be up for anything. We're here in Boston. Kenny, Trey, and myself.
What's going on?
Setting up an interview.
Oh no!
I did it! I made it happen!
He made it happen! He made it happen! Everybody knows your name. Ba, 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 ba.
So in addition to the interviews that we shot for the show, there's what we'd call incidental shooting. And so we took the opportunity to do things like take a tour of Tom Kalinski's basement, where he's got his amazing collection of all things Sega. Just kind of walking us through that and his office and all of this kind of fly on the wall stuff that you think at the time is like, oh, it's the lighting's not great, or oh, the audio went out and all we've got is camera audio. But it ends up being just the life of some of those sections of the story, because it is that, it's real life.
I can still have it in there.
It had adaptive AI, Warren.
Well, I get to Barcelona, Spain at around lunchtime, and I didn't speak Spanish, and the taxi driver didn't speak English. So I showed him my business card, which had the Matchbox orange and yellow logo on it. And he said, "Oh, Matchbox!" And off we go. He knew where Matchbox was. I thought, that's great.
I realize what we're playing right now is a thinly veiled metaphor for our age differences.
Yeah, I played those.
I was trying to be funny.
Sean and I have always had fun collaborating, talking about, him growing up with sort of Intellivision and kind of an Intellivision kid, me growing up as a Nintendo kid. So there's been a lot of conversations with Sean that then kind of find their way into the VO booth. So when we go to, this is now our 4th time doing narration together. And it's always a lot of fun.
They even let Sony call a press conference to announce the new partnership with Nintendo the day before holding their own press conference to announce they were partnering with Philips. Savage!
But I also know what maybe I'd planned to be a 2.5, 3 hour voiceover session usually becomes 6, 7, 8 hours, because there's a lot of collaboration in that room. Hello, here with Mr. Sean Astin.
Hello.
Doing more voiceover for a gaming-related project.
He said, "Let's do voiceover," and I said, "More!"
Here we go again.
Again. Minoru knew that step one for his new American company would be a hit game. But what game?
So that's just a little taste of toy scenes.
Yeah.
Got a little arcade thing going on there.
Yeah. It works so well with Sean's narration because he brings the legitimacy of the narrator and of Sean. It's kind of funny. Shooting a COVID interview was a new experience for me as a filmmaker. Our last two interviews that came in were Trip Hawkins, he was the founder of Electronic Arts, and then Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox. They were such huge gets for us because, you know, they're just industry icons that we knew would have a lot to say about Nintendo and Nintendo's history related to both of those companies, Electronic Arts and Microsoft.
Well, sure. I hope I haven't left anything out.
You covered a lot of ground.
So I was like, oh, how do we do this? In the case of Phil Spencer, Microsoft and the Xbox team, luckily, are very aware of Mediajuice as a studio that produces a lot of video game content, trailers and promos and stuff. And so they were very supportive, and they actually were able to shoot the interview there in Seattle at the Xbox studios. So it was awesome because they set it up and shot it, and I was able to just literally zoom in with a laptop there and conduct the interview that way.
Can you hear me okay, Phil? Not just an echo or anything from on my side, right?
No, I hear you fine.
Can you tell me that story from your point of view as an insider?
You're talking about the equipment, the R&D venture that Sony and Nintendo were involved in together.
Yeah.
But I was really glad that we were able to get those and kind of shoot virtually and still get great looking and sounding footage.
Awesome, thanks, man. We've done a couple of other COVID interviews, and let's see if I can make this work here. See if we can do a sort of virtual...
Hey, wait a minute. I didn't know I could wear shorts. Look at this guy.
We decided that Playing with Power was going to be a documentary and not a narrative. I had a lot of conversations with Sean Astin, who's our executive producer on the series. Like, what if we made this kind of part documentary, part dramatic? What if we, created some scenes, some dramatic scenes? We recreated key moments like, Nintendo of America's meeting with Toys R Us, the court case between Universal and Nintendo to decide the fate of Donkey Kong, the conversion of the radar scope cabinets to Donkey Kong. I'm a toy collector, have been for years, mostly 6th scale, a lot of Hot Toys, a lot of Sideshow.
Oh, this is cool. Is this song by the dude who played R2-D2? Yes, it is.
Watched lots of behind the scenes, so I've watched all the Lord of the Rings behind the scenes. Big fan of Peter Jackson, and in talking with Sean, who obviously was in those films, he said he told me the story of them shooting with what they called the bigatures. So they had entire stages with these sets of Rivendell and the Shire and all the locations of Lord of the Rings. So we decided, okay, we're going to do this. We partnered with a company called Acme Designs and did a lot of sort of pre-production on the what would become these macro scenes, pulling reference images, sketching, provided all those materials to them, and the collaboration began. They would send me ideas and little sculpts and like, what about this, or what if we had this?
Now we gotta do the people, dude. The photograph.
Levi and Trey, what's up, boys?
Hey, Levi and Trey. That's who's doing it.
Yep, Patrick and Corey, right here. Levi and Trey, I mean Kenny and Levi.
We're gonna start right here. You can tell because that's where that edge starts coming in. So right, so I can start right here, and you're just gonna pull. Cool. Let's do it.
We just kind of had this fun back and forth, and I found myself being delighted by the whole process. As a toy collector, I was like, I'm shooting a documentary series, and building toys that we're going to shoot to be in this documentary series. In that instance, you know, the collaboration with Sean really, you know, paid off.
Something about just brought Nintendo brand off the store shelves.
Oh, like it's contradicting that. Yeah.
It always has. All of our conversations and his challenging of me has ended up producing wonderful results. And in this case, that was the case in this particular case. Probe lens. We are very close here.
So I gathered a few of our team members and we began to try and figure out what this looks like. We tried several different ideas, different shooting techniques, shooting with different kinds of lenses and different frame rates and trying to figure out how does this look the best. You know, it was actually a lot of fun because we kind of just got to play.
Macro probe lens there, arcade scene here.
Minoru knew that step one for his new American company would be a hit game. But what game? Space Invaders had just become a global phenomenon, Namco's Galaxian was a massive success, and Galaga, also a space shooter, seemed to be in every arcade in the world.
That's how we do it here at Mediajuice.
Using the macro lens was really interesting because you got such a unique perspective that, you know, just standing there looking at it or shooting through another lens you couldn't really get. And so this tiny little macro lens that we had was just really fun to shoot with.
Let me rack focus from here to there.
After being rejected at Woolworth, next big target, of course, was Toys R Us, which was going to be a very difficult sell. And when we made the presentation to the buyer there, along with other executives in the room, he said they wanted nothing to do with the product, and they'd lost a lot of money and what have you.
One more of those?
And going up. Like all things documentary, you don't quite know exactly how things will be used or all the different instances that they could be used for. So you kind of just plan for anything.
I didn't feel like it was terribly smooth there.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is when you have the camera movement and the Lazy Susan movement, like keeping it a smooth shot.
Let's see.
Neen means luck. 10 means heaven. And do is like a hall or a gathering place. So this was the Neen 10 place, or the luck heaven place.
And so we really just had fun. We tried just a lot of different stuff. Trey being a part of that, and Ian and Brennan and Jeremy. It was a real team effort to figure out what that looked like.
Donkey Kong scene set up here.
That's a wrap.
And that's a wrap.
One thing that is very unique to documentary filmmaking is that you start out with a plan. You want to tell one story and you want it to be this thing that's in your head and that you've written out and you've scripted and storyboarded, but that all kind of changes because you aren't necessarily in control of that.
The editing process for a documentary or a documentary series is interesting in that you find things and you're able to create things in the editing process for documentary that actually inform the story, inform the drama that you wouldn't be able to do, say, with a narrative series, because what you shoot is what you shoot. What you've got there is the story.
Your plan for a documentary can go off the rails pretty quickly. And if you're not prepared and understand that element, it can cause you a lot of anxiety and stress and worry, because you're relying on your interviews and what you find out along the way and the history and things that you didn't know that come to light about your subject matter, even from day to day. I'll be working on an edit and Jeremy will still be doing research.
Can we look at the, I know you had cut together a little bit of an intro into what might be the finale. I just want to see what that feels like right now. It might lead to some ideas.
Sometimes it's just like, oh wow, there's this whole other thread that we never even planned for this, and it's actually like one of our favorite parts of this episode. And you have to be willing to let those things happen, because it's kind of magical and it's just very unique to documentaries. And I think that's something that we do really well and that we embrace. It's like, here's our goal, here's our plan, here's the story, now let's see what we make.
Editing a documentary series, it's a lot of fun, but I think it's kind of a distinct art form separate from narrative editing and commercial editing.
The goal is not to complete the plan, the goal is to tell an interesting and compelling story, and that doesn't necessarily always follow what you originally set out to do.
So if we go here, we can kind of see how we use music to show the origin of Nintendo.
Okay. Hello.
Do it really loud now. Yeah. By far, this is the biggest, most expansive project I've ever worked on as an editor.
At the beginning of 2020, we were all making a 90-minute feature film. We had a lot of great stories that just wouldn't have made the cut.
In sitting down with my lead editor, Kenny and Patrick, I think we all kind of came to the decision, if we're going to tell this story well, we have to give it the time that it needs. We can't rush it, we can't cut things out, and so a 90-minute feature became a 5-part series.
And so Kenny went through our 4-hour timeline and he just found the places that, oh, this is a really good story break right here. Let's end an episode right here. And that would be a really great start to an episode. So let's move that from where it was in the middle and put that at the front.
Like all things documentary, it's something we didn't necessarily plan on, but we're open to the creative process, and it revealed itself to us, and we didn't fight it.
Now, instead of telling a story with a beginning, middle, and an end, one narrative arc has now become 5 narrative arcs.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about it too. I think coming out of the Nintendo Toys era, we need a real connector with one of our talking heads going into the arcade era.
At the very beginning, it was a bare bones timeline. We had maybe a temp music track, we had a script to kind of reference, and we had Sean's voiceover.
Nintendo World Championships took place in 30 cities all around America and brought the Nintendo brand off of the store shelves. See, the only thing is, off of the store shelves, we were just talking about how they created these brand outposts.
Having Sean's narration to work with going into the edit was good because it gave us some structure to start from. It was a very helpful guide just in tone.
Moving on to Act 2 next.
Despite a string of hot new toys, Yamauchi's trading card company turned toy manufacturer. So what was next? The games.
Love it.
So, what was next?
Basically, when we had kind of a rough cut of the story, with just no visuals on it, we would pass those off to the AEs and they would just kind of go nuts and like really sew the story together.
Patrick and Kenny, our lead editors, they would kind of lay down the bones of sections, and there would be times where all I would have was narration, text, and what we wanted to get across in that section, and I just kind of got to explore that.
Trying to craft a story out of something that you can't tell directly is always the biggest challenge.
So you're looking for different types of visuals to work together to kind of build your story, to bring the whole story to life.
So at this point, I guess, I mean, we know what the story is, at least for the narration. You know, we've got that, you laid that out on a timeline.
Yeah, we've got the loose structure. I mean, it's super, super rough, but and then we have, on top of that, we've got all of the different kind of topics that we know we want to cover. Like, you know, we really want to cover these specific areas of the Nintendo story. The one thing we'll have to figure out is how all the different connections and the transitions and how all those things flow together.
The editing process for a documentary or a documentary series is interesting in that you have all these sort of different buckets. You know, you've got your narration, you've got your music, you've got your archival, you've got, in our case, the macro scenes that we shot, the gameplay of the actual games, obviously the interviews, a custom motion graphic.
Things like newspaper articles, magazine covers, print ads. That really helps tell the story in a way that just the voiceover and the sound bites couldn't do on their own.
When it comes to the music, one, you want the music to work as a whole with the subject matter. And so you might go from emotional strings.
Mass exodus. First, Konami and Namco.
To another section, you know, we're talking about the explosion of Xbox or the PS2, and you've got hard-hitting drums.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, happy 2000!
As the new decade began,
I was never afraid to be bold with the song choices, as long as it conveyed the emotion that was accurate to the story.
The chapter title animations for Playing with Power were an interesting evolution. Knowing that our subject matter is Nintendo, how do we visually tell the viewer, we're leaving this section, we're coming into a new section, how do we create statements that kind of draw people in, kind of pull people in, but don't give away the farm? It looks like that's part of a N64 controller, or is that GoldenEye? Or so it's just one example of many of all the tools you kind of have in your tool set as a documentary editor.
Wall, the N64.
Yeah, I think the voiceover coming out of that, instead of going straight into the interviews, having our narrator, you know, kind of taking us through it.
Right. And I wonder if you know, the narration, should we have that come in sooner?
Well, it sounds like we start with a news cutaway soundbite.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good lead-in, but I agree that we should hear Sean sooner.
Yeah.
Seems to be growing up as well.
Now an over $7 billion a year.
Nintendo had unwittingly and unwillingly created a monster.
Well, we're getting closer, and we're going to find out just what we've got here in a couple of weeks. We'll do our final watches and see if we are, in fact, playing with power. And I hope we are. And that's a wrap. I think some of my favorite scenes to work on in post-production was kind of the outliers, the things that people don't know about. So Nintendo versus Universal, or like Tengen, stealing the copyright of the lock chip away to be able to backwards engineer tin can cartridges, you know, sitting with my editors and working with them on how do we tell this story with the tools that we have. I think it's just all those deep cuts that I enjoyed most, kind of bringing to life in the editing process. You and I talked, you're like, well, you know, it makes sense for us to kind of assign, we've got a team of editors here to assign the topics that resonate with them emotionally.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's like, it just makes sense to let people's passions fuel the edit.
Yeah.
I did the first couple of like rough drafts of the GameCube scenes before I then passed it off to somebody else. And I really felt bad working on it, that it's like, okay, we're kind of just pummeling it a little bit, or we're telling the truth. It's a hard truth, but we're telling the truth. It wasn't a complete failure. It had some success. I really wanted to make sure that got in there just so, you know, we give the GameCube a little bit of love, because it needed it.
Like all of Nintendo's systems and games, I loved the GameCube.
I'm actually a big fan of the GameCube and the franchises that were born out of that. I think Eternal Darkness is one of the coolest games that has ever been made.
One of the coolest parts of working on this project for me was actually one of the first sections that I worked on. It was the Pokemon Go section, and honestly, it was kind of like, I didn't expect to be able to get to do as much as I did, and it was really kind of exciting to get to work on that.
Just when the press and the world at large began to put Nintendo in a world of irrelevance,
it's what everybody's talking about near the
to be a smash hit. Wildly popular would be an understatement.
The section that was the most nostalgic for me was definitely the Super Nintendo section. Let's kind of listen to what I picked out here. This is from the selection Kenny had. And I just thought it really fit this section. So right here, we're coming out of Super Nintendo, kind of right here. I'll start you right at this point.
Go back to this transition here.
Let's do this.
but how to leap this hurdle once again with the 16-bit technology of the early 90s? That was the real question.
I just have this memory of this trip me and my sister and my mom took, and my older sister, she brought her Super Nintendo, and we all, for like a week, just played Super Nintendo all together in this beautiful cabin in the middle of Arizona, and it was just like a very fun memory. I mean, everybody has same feeling, different specifics, you know. Everybody has some type of fond memory they have of playing a Nintendo console as a kid, so I think that was a cool moment for me.
I played the N64 to death. That was, I have an enormous amount of memories with my family and with my sister. And so now, being all grown up, you know, 20 years later, getting to tell the story of Nintendo, something that impacted my childhood in such a profound way, is very surreal. Being able to tell this amazing story of a company that had such profound influence on my life, and I'm just very, very happy to be a part of it.
Nope. Jeremy, learn from your mistakes, learn from your mistakes. We gave it a shot with this docu-series, and I think it's turned out. I mean, I'm proud of it. I know the team's proud of it. And so hopefully people appreciate it. Hopefully people watch it and they enjoy it, and if that's what happens, people watch it and it puts a smile on their face, then mission accomplished.